Hey, this is Dr. Ben Weitz, host of the Rational Wellness Podcast. I talk to the leading health and nutrition experts and researchers in the field to bring you the latest in cutting-edge health information. Subscribe to the Rational Wellness Podcast for weekly updates. And to learn more, check out my website, drweitz.com. Thanks for joining me, and let's jump into the podcast. All right, welcome to the Rational Wellness Podcast. Today, our guest is Kirsten Karchmer. I don't know if I pronounced that properly.
That was perfect.
Okay, good. A globally recognized fertility expert, acupuncturist, and CEO and founder of Conceivable. Kirsten has spent decades helping women improve their reproductive health, both through her clinical work and through innovative digital solutions. Conceivable uses technology and personalized science-based programs to optimize fertility by addressing the underlying root causes that impact conception. Today, we'll be talking about how women and couples can naturally enhance their fertility, the lifestyle and health factors that matter most, and how to support reproductive health in a holistic way. Kirsten, thank you so much for joining us.
Gosh, thanks for having me. And that was such an amazing introduction. I was like, oh, I wish I had a copy of that. So great. So thank you for that.
Can you share your journey into the field of fertility and what led you to where you are now?
Absolutely. So I was a competitive gymnast my whole life. I spent most of my childhood in a very hot Texas gym.
So was my daughter from age 4 to 18.
Same with me. And then I got diagnosed with MS.
Oh, wow.
And I ended up going to an acupuncturist who that day really changed my whole life, because I didn't want to go to the acupuncturist. One of my friends, even though I was still sick, I couldn't walk without a cane. I had gotten a job in Korea, and I just was nervous. I didn't know how safe Korea is. And I thought, well, I'm kind of disabled. I use a cane and I don't want to, be a victim there of any kind of crime. So I'm going to start doing the Korean Special Forces training, which is it should just be called the Korean push-up training, because literally you just do thousands of push-ups a day. But what I liked about it is they used a lot of weapons, including canes. And so I thought, well, I can maybe weaponize my disability a little bit. Anyways, long story long, I go against my will to go see this acupuncture. I'm like, acupuncture's crap. That's like psychics. I'm not going to that. It's not going to do anything. And this very kind, older Chinese gentleman was my acupuncturist, who ultimately became one of my professors. And he was like, look, after he felt my pulses and interviewed me, he's like, look, when you were born, your body was very robust, your constitution was very robust, and your disease was very nascent. And then you trained and trained and trained and trained and trained and trained. You trained until you threw up almost every single day, right? Trained without air conditioning, dehydration. He goes, in the time when your body was really developing, you were using so many resources. And he goes, on the outside, you look perfectly healthy. Like, you look as healthy as a person can get, so strong, so lean, but on the insides, all of the systems are so depleted that now the MS has a chance to start bossing you around, essentially. And he said, my job is to repair the constitution such that the MS goes into remission. And of course I was like, whatever, that's never going to happen. And then it did. And I didn't really have any symptoms for about 30 years.
Wow.
It was really when I went through menopause that I just had to start over a little bit. Like, a lot of new things came up that I'd kind of learned how to work with everything. And menopause just brought a whole new level of complexity. Kind of 5 years in now, I'm sort of finally normalizing. But
did you go on hormones?
No.
Okay.
I'm very sensitive, because I'm very sensitive. Like, everything tends to, unless it's just a micro dose, it tends to make things worse. And I have to kind of go very, very small, like test one tiny thing, another tiny thing. I think I'm going to now, though, because I'm more stable. I'm less scared to have a flare up right now, because I'm not in, worse state. Anyway, right. So I got really interested in that way of thinking about the Constitution, and as I started getting better and better every quarter, I was having less.
Forget about the Constitution now. No, just kidding.
No, right. And so then I decided I wanted to go to acupuncture school. And in acupuncture school, what I realized is that in Chinese medicine, every single symptom tells us something. And especially combinations. Like I get an eye twitch at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, only in the third week of my cycle, and it, only lasts 30 seconds. All of that tells us something diagnostic. And with the women's menstrual cycle from day one until her period is over, there is so much robust diagnostic information there. So much so that I didn't want to see men anymore. Because I'm like, they don't have periods. I'm like, I'm operating blind here. And I opened the first women's health clinic in Texas, and then I opened 3 more clinics and was the first board certified reproductive acupuncturist in North America. I treated 10,000 women. And then a study came out that less than 3% of couples could afford fertility treatments. And, in these type of clinics, the care is expensive because it's very high touch. We're not in there for 5 minutes. We're spending an hour.
Right.
And I thought, but I'm part of that problem. And I want to try to solve for that because family is really important to me. And I thought, wow, if 97% of the people who want to have babies don't have access to the resources that they need, and that in many countries, one IVF is the cost of a whole year's salary.
Right.
I was like, that's worth doing. And there's a saying in Chinese medicine that I really love: the good doctor treats the patient, the great doctor treats society, but the master will actually make herself obsolete. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
Then I can rest finally.
Okay, good. So how does your approach to fertility, which I'm understanding to be a functional medicine / acupuncture approach, differ from conventional medical approaches?
I think at the high level, like a Western medical approach is really to look for the presence or absence of a disease state, something that is so bad that it's a diagnosable cause of infertility. And honestly, there's not that many, right? We have blocked tubes, no sperm, eggs are getting too old. There's very few direct causes of infertility. What we're missing is there's at least 50 subclinical factors that any alternative clinician can sort out for themselves, like cycle length, cycle volume, color of blood, consistency, all these other factors. Exercising to exhaustion, like using CrossFit, at least 4 times per week, decreases women's likelihood of conception by more than 70%. So the way we approach it is we interview the patient either in person or, using technology, and then figure out all the subclinical factors. We map them to Chinese medicine things. So we call it energy, but we're really assessing the qi. We call it blood. We're assessing the blood. Stress, we're looking at like stagnation. Hormones, obviously, these are like the side effects from hormonal disruption. And then we can use that to actually predict the likelihood of natural conception. We have a patent on our predictive tool that collects that data and then can analyze it, score it, and predict the likelihood of natural conception. And then we teach the users, why is this important? How does it relate to them? And then we begin the process of, in an iterative way, repairing those using everything that she has: diet, lifestyle, supplements, mindset work, breath work, movement. Not necessarily, I don't like exercise, because we interviewed 16,000 women last year. And the first question for us always is, on a 1 to 10 without caffeine or exercise for 2 days, what's your energy like? And 8% had energy 8 out of 10. Everybody else was below. And 50% said their energy was 5 or below. This is 16,000 women. This isn't a small sample. And if you can't make and conserve and restore energy every single day, everything else you do will not work. And this is not something that we use supplements for. I think most of this comes from lifestyle. So we have to analyze how the person's living and then start building strategies for them to help repair that.
But when it comes to exercise, too much exercise obviously can be a negative, but no exercise, I would think, is also a negative and is going to lead to less energy as well.
True. But what we want to remember is that if your energy is a 5 out of 10 and you go and work out for an hour, you don't have enough energy to get through the day. So when you start lifting or doing whatever kind of workout that you're doing,
you are going endorphins and you'll get adrenaline and
but you tap into the adrenal glands. Yes, but you tap into the adrenals.
But you also tap into your testosterone and your growth hormone levels.
100%. But Ken, what we recommend,
or you stimulate those.
Right. So how do we do that without going into flight or fright? Right? How do we not tap the adrenals, which are already blown out for most people? Remember that, like, when a person goes into flight or fright, your position, you start dumping adrenaline, but then the side is dumping cortisol, and cortisol is made from the same stuff we make progesterone from. So the higher the cortisol, the lower the progesterone. So we want to stay out of stressful situations, especially induced ones from exercise. So we advise people to start while their energy is low, start with a 10-minute walk after every meal. Start with 10 push-ups on your kitchen counter 3 times a day throughout the day instead of 30 push-ups at once. And watching your heart rate variability and seeing like what is, your heart rate variability is going to drop from exercise, but you should be fully restored the next day. We're building some face scan technology that will actually scan your face and immediately tell you what your HRV is so that people can actually be using it. The app is more of a biomarker, like to be measuring certain biomarkers in addition to their perceived symptoms.
Also, this is going to measure their heart rate by scanning their face?
It can measure heart rate, body composition, blood pressure, HRV, VO2 max, and a few other stress metrics.
Really?
Because it can break down. It's not finished yet, but it'll be able to break down just from a space scan from the HRV. You get HRV from coherence, which is how connected is brain, heart, and lungs. But you also get it from the ratio between is this person right now, what percentage are they in flight or fight versus rest and relax? And what you'll see is that most people who are stressed and have low resilience, low heart rate variability, they'll be in flight or fright a lot of the day. Even when they do things like get a massage or get an acupuncture treatment, they're so not resilient that it takes a lot more to pull them out of flight or fright. Even a night of sleep won't necessarily pull them out. And we have to interrupt that.
All right. So no exercise.
Not no exercise. Not strenuous exercise. As you start, like for us, as you start the process of what we do, the energy starts to come up. And as the person goes from a 4 energy to a 5 energy, they start adding a little bit more movement. They start making sure that they're staying out of flight and fright. They get to 8 out of 10, they can do anything they want typically. They're resilient when it's with, but you have to measure it based on no exercise or caffeine for 2 days, because if they're exercising, they'll have adrenaline in their system and they'll be like, my energy's really good.
As of right now, you offer a ring that kind of looks like an Aura ring that measures HRV and some other things, right?
Yes. In fact, it's the first non-invasive glucose monitor. That's what's sexy and the most interesting thing about it.
Measures
so it uses
glucose.
Light.
People have been talking about that for a long time and we've never seen anything on the market yet.
Yes. So it can't be FDA approved. It's not a device for a diabetic. This is not what you would use. This is really for biohacking.
Okay.
Of those 16,000 people that we interviewed, 8. So we had 8% had energy that was above 8 out of 10. 8's a very lucky number, but we only had 8 people who knew their blood sugar status, high, low, or normal. They're like, I just don't have any idea. That was the answer to the question. And because blood sugar is incredibly important for fertility. The higher your blood sugar, basically, the lower your fertility. It's less stable ovulation. It affects egg quality, affects sperm, affects the uterine lining. So we need to know about it. And at least in our technology, it can see that the person's blood sugar is high. And then we do custom menu planning. So then it's like, oh, this person's blood sugar is too high. We need to have more protein, fiber, and fat. And then we can have a hypothesis. Is this going to make a difference? She tracks what she's eating and not, and then goes back, oh, okay, we're starting to get the blood sugar under control.
So your device can measure blood sugar. It's not FDA approved yet, but how far away from seeing FDA approved products on the market for measuring blood sugar from Light?
Like a ring? We're far from it because it isn't that accurate.
Okay.
It's not like, again, if you were to get FDA cleared, we have to call it a medical device, which would make it appropriate for a diabetic. And we just can't get that level of granularity where you would say, oh, it's 99.4.7. It's really high, low, or normal. And we want to be really careful to say, like, this is not, again, to be used as a medical device to monitor blood sugar, but as a tool to see, like, where are these subclinical, like I would call blood sugar issues to be another subclinical factor, right?
Right.
People don't know about it. This is an easy thing if you're using the ring. Our ring is half of it expensive. It correctly tracks temperature, which the Aura doesn't. And the biggest difference is I think that there's good data that shows that tracking actually does not change the outcomes. Doesn't change. There's no data that shows that tracking anything changes outcomes in any way materially. And it's because it just gives you information. Like, you got 10,000 steps. You might go, okay, tomorrow I'm going to get 10,010, but evidently people don't do that too much. And what we think is more valuable is to help people to understand, to analyze that data, not in an individual, not how many steps you got, but the whole picture. So you can use the analyze tool to hit that button, and then the software looks at every single piece of data the user has shared, from what came from the wearable, what came from the face scan, what came from her consultation, what came from what she tracked, what she's eating, how she's thinking, how her what she's telling her therapist about her stress levels, not the actual information, but just it gauges like her level of stress, and then gives her an analysis. So, okay, it looks like your energy is still a 5 out of 10, but when I look at your sleep, you're still only getting 5 hours of sleep. So let's dig in there, because if we don't fix that, we can't fix the energy thing. So is it that you can't fall asleep, stay asleep, wake up rested? And then she might say, I can't fall asleep. Then the tool will say, well, tell me about your caffeine intake. Do you drink caffeine? Yes. How many cups of coffee? 4 cups of coffee. Okay. Now the AI is going, okay, well, when do you have those coffees? I have 2 in the morning and I have 2 at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, there's our sleep problem. At least that's the first hypothesis. Okay, what happens if we take the coffee in the afternoon away? Can she sleep? If not, we got to go to the next one and the next one and the next one.
All right. So sleep is important. How much sleep is optimal?
The data show for optimal performance in any way, especially with athletic performance, 9 hours.
How about for fertility?
There's no data on what's optimal, but I'll say I have everyone that I'm working with privately, not using our tool, work to see if they can get to 9 hours of sleep. And basically we just start with going to bed 15 minutes earlier and 15 minutes. And I was like, we have this myth that being tired means you're lazy, and that if you need to sleep, that you're lazy. But most people, I don't work with a lot of men, I do work with some, but most women are really tired. So you start giving them permission to go to bed at 8 o'clock every night and they can sleep. I have so many women who are like, oh my gosh, I'm sleeping 10 hours a night. And I was like, don't worry, this won't last forever. As everything starts to heal, you'll start waking up 30 minutes earlier, and then an hour earlier, or you can go to bed 30 minutes later, or 30 minutes, and what you'll get to is somewhere between 8 and 9 hours.
Yeah. So right now I'm 67 years old, and I don't think there's been a single day on this earth when I've slept 9 hours. But the most common sleep recommendations are 7 to 8 hours. So 9 is not what you typically hear.
So I think that I want to speak to that, because I think it's just like saying, like, well, what most people say is a normal period is 28 to 45 days. But if you have a 45-day cycle, that means you're ovulating on 31, which means the egg is already started to be absorbed. Right? So we have these generalizations about healthcare, about like what's right and what's perfect. But if we actually look at the real data, like what is optimal, not just, I don't know what they base those 7 to 8 hours on. I think that lots of people can function on 7 to 8 hours, but what you'll see is that most people, if you get the heart rate variability above 100 and you get them sleeping 8-ish, 9 hours, the constitution starts to get restored very quickly. But getting to that can take a month or two.
I've really been enjoying this discussion, but I just want to take a few minutes to tell you about a product that I'm very excited about. Imagine a device that can help you manage stress, improve your sleep, and boost your focus, all without any effort on your part. The Apollo wearable is designed to do just that. Created by neuroscientists and physicians, this innovative device uses gentle vibrations to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, helping you feel calmer, more focused, and better rested. Among the compelling reasons to use the Apollo wearable are that users experience a 40% reduction in stress and anxiety. Patients feel that they can sleep. Their sleep improves up to additional 30 minutes of sleep per night. It helps you to boost your focus and concentration. and it's scientifically backed. And the best part is you can get all these benefits with a special $40 discount by using the promo code Weitz, WEITZ, my last name, at checkout to enjoy these savings. So go to Apollo Neuro and use the promo code Weitz today. And now back to our discussion. What about nutrition? What are some of the important dietary factors that are going to improve fertility?
So start with the Mediterranean diet. Like, you're not going to go wrong with a Mediterranean diet, like, especially if you're choosing like ultra clean animal products.
What is the Mediterranean diet to you?
To me, it's like vegetable based with still like about 15 to 20% clean grass-fed animal products and plenty of healthy fat. And then any permutation, but that isn't what we recommend, because I don't think that's basically what the medical literature suggests, is using the Mediterranean diet. But what we use is a combination of sort of Mediterranean diet, the heart diet, and Chinese medicine food therapy, because everything that we do is personalized. That's how you can get ridiculous results, which is in functional medicine. This is what we're doing, right? We're really paying attention to the exact problems. We're not saying like, this is the MS diet. We're like, well, what is the diet that's right for your problem? Like, why is your MS so active? Let's use food to target those problems. And the same thing. So, we have to identify what the subclinical factors are. One person might only have 1 day of bleeding. If she only has 1 day of bleeding, she doesn't have enough lining to get or stay pregnant. It just be almost impossible. And it's going to be very hard to stay pregnant, because they're literally, what she's showing us from that 1 day of bleeding is there just aren't enough resources to make enough blood. But physiologically, we need to double the blood volume to make a placenta to nourish the baby. And so we want to address that. And so that person obviously is going to get a lot of iron, easy to digest iron rich foods, a lot of B vitamins, a lot of, healthy fats, all these things to enrich and build the blood. But say somebody has fibroids and they have hemorrhagic bleeding, stark blood full of clots. Well, that diet is actually not appropriate for those people. They don't need to make more blood. They don't want to congest the blood and cause more clotting. We actually want to use foods that can kind of thin the blood a little bit, more hydrating foods, more invigorating foods, more warming foods, and things like that. So what it mostly comes down to is really figuring out what are the biggest problems that this person has. Like, if the person has gut issues, we know that the lining of the intestine, the small intestine, doubles in pregnancy to account for increased nutrient needs. However, what they found was that women who had pre-existing gut issues, they didn't have that doubling, which means they're having compromised access to nutrients for that developing baby. So for me, if they have a gut issue, obviously easy to digest, we're going to give them digestive enzymes. We're going to give them colostrum, almost all cooked foods, more warming foods, that kind of stuff.
As part of your workup, are you doing a complete iron panel micronutrient analysis?
None of it.
Okay.
So
you really have no idea if they need iron or not.
So what we know, we don't know if they need iron, and we're not adding iron, we're using nutritional iron in nutrition. But what we know is that if they have 1 day of bleeding, there is a very high correlation to anemia, a very high correlation. So you can correlate days of menstrual bleeding to blood ferritin, to hematocrit loosely, you're not going to say 1-to-1 relationship. But because the mission of the work that we're doing is to make this care, which is usually very expensive, almost free, right? So easy to use, extremely affordable. So as soon as we start adding a lot of functional blood tests into it and needing someone to interpret those, we start getting a lot more expensive. And what we're able to pull from is like Chinese medicine evolved from 3,500 years ago, at least, observational data. And, using the system that we use, we increase the likelihood women would get pregnant by 150 to 260% in 4 months with no human interaction.
Well, it's hard to get pregnant without human interaction.
Well, with me or anybody on my team.
Okay.
That's true. That was actually well played. That's very funny. I like you.
Okay. So, we touched a little bit on sleep and exercise and a little bit about nutrition. I know that you offer some supplements that are available. How do you decide which supplements to use and which you think are most beneficial for which patients?
So exact same thing from that assessment that we use, whether in person or with our tool. We're looking for the subclinical factors that are problematic. Again, there are no supplements that are good for fertility. Everybody is different. Every single infertility and miscarriage patient will have a unique presentation, and you want to use supplements that target their unique underlying issues. Like if the person doesn't have cervical discharge, this is a real problem. But if they don't have cervical discharge, the first thing is like, are you drinking enough water? Because if you're dehydrated, you won't have cervical. There's not a problem. The problem is dehydration, right? But if they're hydrated, then we might use things like arginine or super high quality vitamin E. If they have scanty bleeding, we're using iron, B vitamins. If we're suggesting, not prescribing. We're suggesting based on what if we know they're 40 years old, we know they have an egg quality issue, so we're using antioxidants and things like that. And we built a tool that basically through that interview process can then figure out what supplements are right and put it into individual packs for them.
What are your favorite antioxidants?
Super simple, like NAC, omega, A, E, C. Those are the primary ones that we use. We, sometimes use, those are going to be your main ones. We're not fancy. This is not a fancy system at all. It's really about what's available. And even sometimes we use, like for blood sugar, we might use inositol or berberine. But berberine, inositol is like a penny and berberine's really expensive. So if we're trying, and we can get pretty similar results. So, how do we get the most bang for the buck for having the customer spending the least amount of money while still delivering incredibly high quality stuff?
Okay. What about managing stress?
So, I do a live show every day on TikTok, and the most common thing that people say is, how do you cope with the stress, anxiety, and grief related to infertility?
I got one. Get off of TikTok.
True, but on my live, people say that being on the live makes them very happy because you just talk about this actually not that hard. Like when they see, it's hard when you're infertile because no one will tell you anything. They're like, I don't know, unexplained infertility. Maybe you're too old. Maybe it's your guy, but there's not a lot of data for at least 40% of the people. And so when I start explaining like, oh, well, your energy is a 2, you got 1 day of bleeding, your period comes every 70 days. Of course, you're not getting pregnant yet. We actually have some work to do. We have to, figure out what's causing those things and start to repair them. And then your natural fertility will be improved.
I know your treatment is focused on women, but it's my understanding that when it comes to fertility problems, men are at least half the problem.
True. And we are building for men, solutions for men. Yeah. It's interesting. A study was released 5 years ago. Paul Turek is the author, and he's a urologist in LA. They found that core semen parameters are basically like the menstrual cycle. A woman's menstrual cycle is a great predictor and like window into her overall health. And a semen analysis does the same thing. Men who had abnormal semen parameters had significant increased risk for prostate cancer, more severe prostate cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. So the good news is that all of that is lifestyle related, which means lifestyle can fix it. Unless there's a structural problem like a spermatocele or a varicocele, obviously those have to be surgically intervened. But for the most part, in about 90 to 120 days, men can make radical improvements in their semen analysis if they're willing to make changes. And sometimes that's exercising less.
Okay. What role does epigenetics play?
Everything. All of this is epigenetics. We know from the twin studies, they have many epigenetic studies where they took identical twins, female twins with the BRCA gene, that's the breast cancer gene. And then they were like, why is it that these are genetically identical women who grew up in the same house? How is it that one gets breast cancer and one doesn't? And they tied it all back to epigenetics, which is basically epigenetics is looking at the impact of diet, lifestyle, and behavioral health on health outcomes. In those studies, they were looking at the effects of diet and lifestyle on breast cancer, presentation outcomes. But, we know that, we have women who have poor egg quality issues. Well, you can't change the eggs, right? The eggs were born, you can change the sperm because men are making new sperm every 180 days, but women are born with their eggs. but those eggs mature over 90 days before they're ready for fertilization. In that follicular recruitment period, they're exposed to us, to if we smoke, if we drink alcohol, if we're really stressed, if our diet's not good, if we're overheated, or if our temperatures are poorly regulated. And that really affects egg quality. So if we look at epigenetics, what they were able to demonstrate in a lot of those studies, that actually changing diet, lifestyle, and behavioral health can impact the turning on and turning off pathological phenotypes and genotypes, meaning genes. So it's really where all of our work is. Everything that will affect the improvement of the genetic presentation is going to be beneficial to the woman, optimizing her fertility, but also her ability to stay pregnant and have a healthy baby, which is really the only number we look at.
I'm pretty sure your answer to this question is going to be no, but do you look at genetics to see what the propensities are?
No, we don't, because again, it's not in our scope. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to be a chiropractor. I could probably I took one Tuina class. And I think we had to adjust a neck, which is so scary with no training, but it's just not in my lane. And I think that people do the best when I trained a lot of acupuncturists. I always say, stay in your lane. You're not a chiropractor. You're not a naturopath. You're an acupuncturist. And it can take 100 lifetimes to learn Chinese medicine, really, really well. And I think when we try to get into the places that are not our areas of domain expertise, and plus genetic testing, I just had a ton of it, $25,000. So if their insurance isn't paying for it, we just have then another financial barrier that I don't even think makes that big of a difference. The work that we're doing is more first line of defense. I always tell people, if you've been working with us one way or the other for 9 months to a year and your conceivable score is above 70 and you're still not getting pregnant and we have good sperm, this is where we start looking at genetics, at reproductive immunology. Not with us, though. We refer out to the clinicians who that's their domain expertise.
All right.
And that's such a small percentage, right?
For women who are older, what are some of the more effective strategies for fertility?
What was interesting is in the pilot that we did with the software that we built, I was telling my team, if it's 50% as good as me, we should build it. But what we found was that, I mentioned before that we increase the likelihood of women getting pregnant by 150 up to 260%. The women who got the 260% were age 38 to 44. They had the highest improvement in natural fertility. And so that was very shocking to me, because you would think it would be the opposite. But I suspect it's because as women get older, they just get more and more responsibility. They might have a child or two children already, and they're taking care of their house, they're taking their career, they're trying to get fit and be on Instagram and all this stuff. And they just get more and more worn out caring for everybody else. And you start putting all the spotlight on their health and really measuring everything so that they can see, if you don't invest a little bit in yourself, we're not going to make progress. And then when they do it, they can make profound changes.
All right.
Because then, I feel like I didn't answer that question for your listeners well enough. If they're like, well, that was not useful. I think as we are aging, what we want to think about is blood volume, because we see the volume of blood starts to decrease. So paying attention, do you have 4 days of bleeding, soaking a tampon or a pad about every 4 hours? That's consistent with the most likely successful implantation lining. And if not, what are the problems, and start working on that. Also, we have clear problems with egg quality. Typically, this is because of blood flow to the ovaries. As the ovaries age, they actually start to atrophy and look like a little wilty plant. And the pituitary gland has to shout louder and louder, release an egg, release an egg. The ovaries start to release VEGF, which is an enzyme that's secreted by the heart in cardiac arrest, trying to draw blood to it, right? So the ovaries please just give us some water. So things like breath work is incredibly valuable for driving blood to the pelvis. And I like a guy on YouTube who's free, Breathe with Sandy. I wish he would do some breath work for us. Sandy, if you ever hear this, for some classes for us, but he's really good. And then this is where acupuncture can be very valuable, because when you're putting needles, anywhere you stick a needle, you're improving blood flow. So if you're just getting needles right on top of the ovaries every time, you are actually artificially driving blood to the ovaries, but you need to make enough blood so that we're not, only just driving it to the ovaries.
Right. All right.
Anti-inflammatories, antioxidants, diet is huge, and stress management and doing less. So many women who are getting close to 40, and I ask them, tell me about their day. They're like, well, I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and then I go to the gym and then I come home and I make breakfast for my family. And then I do a load of wash and then I go to work and then I pick up my kids and then I go to the grocery store and I make dinner and then I go to bed. I was like, whoa, where's your fun in there? Like, where's your life in there? There's no time for restoration, for reflection, for like down regulation.
Yeah, I get it. That's modern life.
But we're seeing that modern life in our fertility rates, right? Which are for both men and consistently declining.
Right. Good. So where do you see fertility care heading in the next 10 years?
It's a little bit scary. Even though I am a big proponent of AI, we will have the ability to sort of have designer babies, not with me, but, to use genetic testing of the embryos to select many, many different things. And I think that a lot of people want that, although I don't think it's good for our species. In women's health, I have a colleague who just got an FDA approval for a new tool that uses AI to look at a mammogram. And they're able to identify breast cancer 5 years earlier. 5 years. I mean, at that stage is even earlier than in situ, right? So we'll be able to save a lot of lives there. For me, if I do my job right and I teach, for me, I'm building software to do all of this, right? Because I'm on a mission to make it more affordable. And we're not only just building for fertility. Our roadmap for this year is to build interventions from before girls get their first period all the way through postpartum. So what we're actually building is an operating system for women's health. And so in 10 years, I hope that Conceivable is the operating system for women's health, just like, Mac OS and AWS, that it's the system that both analyzes, intervenes, assesses, but then the user is providing a lot of data, and then we can use AI to learn from that data and continue to get more insights about how do we help people better.
If you could leave our listeners with one key takeaway about improving fertility naturally, what would it be?
The most important thing is to know, can I do two?
Sure. Yeah.
So the first one is to know that at least 80% of fertility issues can be fixed by you.
Okay.
Not jump into IUI or IVF. There are many places where you can start to identify what are these underlying issues, right? And then start to work on them.
Well, what about women who go to a OB who says, your age, so-and-so, your chances of getting pregnant are very low?
I would tell them to download the Conceivable app and do the assessment and get their Conceivable score. Because we validated in a clinical trial, it's very predictive of a woman's likelihood of natural conception, and then see what the problems are that it identifies. And then see, can I work on these? My energy is a 2 out of 10, but I only sleep 2 hours. Okay, well, I'm going to take 3 months to try to work on a few of those things. I just think that what's happening is we're encouraging women to jump into assisted reproductive technologies like IUI and IVF, which I have no aversion to. They will help a lot of people that we will not be able to help who will actually need it. But what we're not educating women about is that those interventions do almost nothing to help you to stay pregnant. They may, IUI is very low, 10% increased likelihood of getting pregnant, 10% for $2,200. You wouldn't go to Vegas if you had a 10% chance of winning and slap down $2,000, right? There's no way you do it. And especially if you got a really bad hangover from it. Same with IVF. We need women to be ready to be successful for these interventions so that we can, one, get the success rates up. We can make it more affordable and accessible for more people. And we're helping women to get pregnant when they're their best selves. We know that the moment of conception for both the man and the woman is the most predicted. Her health and his health at the moment of conception is one of the biggest predictors of the health of the offspring. So we decide we want to have a baby, and then we get super anxious about I got to get pregnant. I got to get pregnant. I got to get pregnant. But what we stop thinking about is how can I prepare to have a healthy child? And taking the focus off just getting pregnant and thinking about just the bigger picture, you'll have an easier time getting pregnant. You'll have a healthier pregnancy. You'll enjoy your pregnancy more, which it's maybe the only time you're ever pregnant in your life, and hopefully healthier labor and delivery and baby.
That's great. How can listeners and viewers find out about your programs?
The best way is just to head over to conceivable.com. TikTok's about to go away. I'm very active on TikTok, but it's about to go away. So your best bet is just to head over there. If you email us through anything on the website, you can just say, get this to Kirsten, and happy to chat
what
about
makes you
anything.
so sure TikTok is going away?
Well, they've already announced the date in which it's going to away. Like, I think it's like March 16th. And Mark Zuckerberg is going to launch a US version of TikTok called M2, Meta 2, which I hate. I just don't think it's good to have a monopoly, right, on social media. I don't think it's healthy for the country.
So what you're saying, Zuckerberg's going to buy the TikTok, or he's going to buy the...
It's Zuckerberg and somebody else. And I'm just drawing a blank on who else put a bunch of money in, not Amazon. I want to say it's like a consulting firm, like Accenture, but it's not that. And they came together.
Probably Donald Trump Jr.
Probably. It's not good, right? Because what they're doing by having to, and then so that was supposed to launch on September 5th. It did not launch. I don't know why, but, and I think we have like till March something until they're going to turn off TikTok for sure this time, because they don't want us, basically the new TikTok, you won't have access to any content outside of the US, like China, and North Korea.
Right.
But I have a very active community, like 500,000 followers on TikTok.
We have to limit things now that we're in a kingship.
Well, it's kind of interesting because, Trump had promised to make IVF free for everybody.
Yeah.
And as soon as I saw that, and I was like,
oh, yeah, sure.
As soon as they see the bill for that.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, sure. That was going to happen. Yeah.
Then they came up like, no, we changed our mind. We're going to do only restorative reproductive medicine. And then I was like, oh shit, that's kind of what I do actually.
You're not
already
going to get any kind of medicine. So they do need your app because they're not going to be able to afford anything else.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Kirsten.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for making it all the way through this episode of the Rational Wellness Podcast. For those of you who enjoy listening to the Rational Wellness Podcast, I would very much appreciate it if you could go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify and give us a 5-star ratings and review. As you may know, I continue to accept a limited number of new patients per month for functional medicine. If you would like help overcoming a gut or other chronic health condition and want to prevent chronic problems and want to promote longevity, please call my Santa Monica Weitz Sports Chiropractic and Nutrition office at 310-395-3111, and we can set you up for a consultation for functional medicine. And I will talk to everybody next week.